They were only a few centimeters from her face taking these pictures. And according to him, her last words were, "Oh my God, leave me alone, leave me alone." And even though Diana was no longer a royal, one thing that she did not escape was the paparazzi. They continue to be obsessed with her, probably even more so. And the night of August 7th, 1997, Diana and Dodi were staying at the Ritz Hotel in Paris. But according to a friend, Dodi was planning to propose to Diana that night. So the paparazzi were extra bad. Just after midnight, they decided to go back to Dodi's apartment. And on this night, Diana just wanted to leave with her boyfriend. She was sick of the paparazzi. So they made this plan to lose them. They were gonna have Diana's security team wait out front of the hotel, make it look like she was going to be coming out and leaving. Meanwhile, Henri Paul, who was the head of security at the Ritz, huge character in this story, would drive them over to Dodi's apartment from the back entrance. But one of her bodyguards, Trevor Rees-Jones, refused to let her go without security, so he went with them. They left shortly after midnight, but unfortunately, they did not leave undiscovered, and some paparazzi caught wind that they were back there, went around to the back, and followed them. And only 5 minutes into their drive, Henri Paul drove the car into the Pont de la Mare tunnel. He lost control of the car and crashed into the 13th pillar inside. And this was a really bad wreck, guys. I mean, her car was crunched. Trevor, her bodyguard, was the only one who survived, and that was because he was wearing his seatbelt. There's this doctor named Frederick Mali, and he claims that when he got to the limo, Diana was still alive and that she was calling out for Dodi. And as this whole scene is unfolding, the paparazzi is doing nothing to help. They chased them into that tunnel, so they were all there, and all they did was take pictures. That doctor said that they were only a few centimeters from her face taking these pictures. And according to him, her last words were, "Oh my God, leave me alone, leave me alone," which is, really, really upsetting to think about. And I guess in France, back then at least, the way that they deal with emergency situations was completely different. They would treat on the scene and then transport once a patient is stable enough to make the ride. So Diana wasn't actually transported to the hospital until 1:20 a.m. This is over an hour after the accident happened. There was nothing that they could do. Diana was pronounced at 4:01 a.m. She was only 36 years old, and the news of her death shocked the world. And pretty much right away, people were suspicious of this accident. And like I said, her bodyguard Trevor survived the crash. People were really hoping that when he woke up, maybe he would remember something important. But when he woke up, all he remembered was getting into the limo back at the hotel, and then it just went black. So at first, it seemed like the narrative that they were pushing about the accident was that Diana because of the paparazzi. But this all very quickly changed when they got the official report back on Henri Paul. French officials concluded that the accident was caused by reckless driving on behalf of Henri Paul. It turns out Henri was driving about 65 miles an hour and was allegedly. And that was the end of that, or so authorities thought. But people would go on to speculate to this day about what actually caused that crash. People started talking about the idea that this was a planned accident very, very early on. But a full inquest into the crash didn't happen for nearly 10 years. And during that time, there was so much public pressure on British officials that they were forced to launch Operation Paget, which was an inquiry to establish whether there was any truth to the conspiracy theories. It started in 2004 and wasn't completed until 2008. Diana Frances Spencer. Who is she? She was born July 1st, 1961. One misconception is that she was a commoner who was suddenly whisked into the princess role, but it turns out that she and her family was very close with the royal family, and they grew up playing with the princes. And it seemed that Diana knew from a young age that she was gonna be important. So then in the summer of 1980, Prince Charles started showing interest in Diana. They started dating, and the paparazzi were really into it. They would literally follow them around on dates. So he decides that Diana is a good fit, and he decides to propose to her in February of 1981. And this was a huge role. She could possibly be the queen one day. But most people say that this seemed to be kind of forced. Now here's the thing with the royal family, right? A lot of them used to marry each other. They would keep it very controlled. So they don't let the king or the prince just go out and marry anybody. And they basically have to be approved. All eyes were on Diana for sure, because she wasn't the stereotypical British royal. She was the first woman to ever have a job before marrying into the royal family. Diana was going to have things her way. She was going to be this new kind of royal, because in the vows, she actually made them remove the word obey. And it seemed like the royals from the beginning were very concerned about what that could look like for them. She started being referred to as the people's princess because she was so relatable and she would get out there and be with people. She started really forging her own path in charity work, and she advocated for those who suffered with mental illness. And one thing about the royals is they want to look perfect. They don't want to look like they have emotional issues. Diana experienced bulimia from the pressure of being a royal, and she actually said this was caused by Prince Charles. After she had her babies, she had postpartum depression. She thought about taking her own life, and she was the first royal family member to ever talk about these things publicly. And eventually things got even worse. Prince Charles at the time was actually kind of in love with someone else, Camilla. And apparently when she confronted him about the affair, he said, well, I refuse to be the only Prince of Wales who never had a mistress. So they officially announced their separation in 1992. And in the terms of the divorce, Diana actually lost her title as Her Royal Highness. So eventually Diana moved on and Charles went back with Camilla. But Diana's free now, right? And in the summer of 1997, she starts dating this guy named Dodi Fayed. He's a film producer and the son of an Egyptian billionaire. So that night, because they were being chased, Henri Paul drove into that tunnel going 65 miles an hour, which is incredibly dangerous. Some people argue that he could have been going even faster than that. And after they did some research into it, it seems that this is normal practice for the paparazzi, that they will chase you that fast, and that there was a lot of these kind of races going on. So they ended up looking at 9 photographers and 1 motorcycle driver, and they were investigated as possibly causing involuntary and for failing to aid the victims. Instead of doing anything to help, they just stood around taking pictures. And there's this idea that they possibly could have purposely caused that crash to get good photos. 3 eyewitnesses saw this bright light flash in the tunnel. They said it was much brighter than a camera flash, and it definitely could have blinded Henri Paul as he drove into the tunnel. And British authorities have never been able to figure out what actually caused that bright light. So they determined that it just never happened. Also, right before the crash, it said that there was a white Fiat Uno that hit the back of their limo and pushed it into the pillar. And this mystery Fiat apparently sped away afterwards. One couple said that they were almost hit by the Fiat as it swerved around them in the tunnel. Also, authorities found white paint on the side view mirror and the bumper of the limo, and pieces of plastic in their wreckage that matched the Fiat. And apparently, French authorities spent 2 years searching for this mystery Fiat and never found it. They never positively identified the driver, but there are a few suspects. There's this taxi driver named Lee Van Than, who was a 22-year-old at the time of the crash, and he owned a white Fiat Uno, and he was identified by a witness as the driver. And according to his father, he actually went and woke his brothers up in the middle of the night a few hours after the crash and had them help paint his Fiat from white to red. And not only that, he also replaced the bumpers on the car. French authorities claim that he wasn't interviewed further because they had checked into his alibi already and ruled him out. The owner of the Fiat also could have been this photojournalist named James Anderson. And some people and authorities believe that he was really an informant for MI6, which, if you don't know what MI6 is, it's basically like the FBI. It's one of the UK's intelligence and security agencies. Shortly after the crash, he also painted his Fiat and sold it. He was very briefly interviewed by French police and almost immediately cleared. But then in 2000, they found him in a BMW that was parked in a forest in the south of France, and someone had lit this car on fire out there. The only survivor of the crash at this point was Trevor. And as time went on, he started to remember more and more about the night of the crash. He specifically recalled that there was a motorbike that followed them into the tunnel and kind of cut off Henri Paul making it so he couldn't exit the tunnel. And before the crash happened, a witness described this same motorbike. According to this witness, after the crash, this man walked over to the scene calmly, held up his hands in an X, like he was signaling to someone or something, and then got back on his motorbike and left. Didn't even take photos, so why was he there? Now, it would be really nice if there was some video footage, surveillance of this tunnel, so we could clear up some of these questions, but there is none. Even though there were 14 CCTV cameras in the tunnel that night, guys, 14, and not one of them was working, not one of them picked up anything. Some of them were turned around the opposite way, some of them were switched off, and authorities claimed that none of the cameras were even working that day. But this has been highly debated because there was a person who got a speeding ticket from one of those cameras conveniently 15 minutes after the accident occurred. And there also happened to be no CCTV footage at all on their whole trek from the hotel to the tunnel, which is insane because they passed tons of cameras on the way. So let's talk a little bit more about Henri Paul, the driver of the car. There's been a lot of speculation that he possibly could have been working for MI6. It turns out that in the months before his death, someone had made direct deposits to his bank account for some large amounts. It's also possible that Henri was used to cause the crash, but didn't actually cause it himself. And what's also very strange is that his also showed a very high level of carbon monoxide. It was so high that he should have been unconscious. And since he at the scene, like on impact, he wouldn't have inhaled any fumes from the car, any CO2. So there's been a lot of speculation about this. And many people think that his test could have been possibly switched with someone else, possibly a suicide victim who of carbon monoxide poisoning. Trevor, the bodyguard who was in the car that night and should probably know more than anybody, said that he did not seem impaired at all, because if he was, he wouldn't have allowed Diana to even ride in that car. Also, the Mercedes limo might have been tampered with. It turns out that it was actually a stolen car that had been bought by a rental company, and it was actually missing this microchip that controlled crucial things, including acceleration, braking, steering, and navigation. Some people even believe that this microchip was replaced with some type of remote control and that the crash was caused from afar. And another one of the biggest things here is the fact that it took them so long to get Diane to the hospital. She wasn't in surgery until an hour and 40 minutes after her accident. Also, people found out that the ambulance was only driving about 25 to 30 miles an hour, which seems weird when you have Princess Diana in the back. And they also didn't take her to the nearest hospital. They took her to one out of the way. The ambulance had stopped on the way to the hospital. And at one of these times where they stopped, they were so close to the hospital that it was literally in sight, but they fully stopped. A lot of people believe that maybe there's a reason for this. Maybe the ambulance was delaying things on purpose. All these details together really paint a picture that it's quite possible Princess Diana was murdered. And if that's the case, then who did it and why? During that British inquest, this guy named Richard Tomlinson, who was a former MI6 officer, revealed that the agency had been monitoring Diana and they had a secret informant who was working at the Ritz Hotel in Paris. And he actually believed Henri Paul was that informant. So that would put a lot of pieces together. And he said that in 1992, he was shown plans for an identical accident. And it involved the same use of a bright flash in a tunnel to cause an accident. Plus, Diana was kind of people off around the world. One of the things that Diana was working on before she was a project to clear landmines around the world. And she was a few months before the United Nations Mine Ban Treaty was opened for signatures. This treaty prohibited the use, stockpiling, production, and transfer of landmines. And a lot of government officials around the world wanted to stop it, including officials in the UK. Some British lawmakers even started referring to her as a loose cannon. Plus, it was possible that Diana was about to get a lot more power. She was in talks with Prime Minister Tony Blair about a special government role. This role would have given her a much larger and government-backed platform for her causes, so she was excited about it. Diana was on the radar for US intelligence agencies as well. They had a top secret file on Diana with more than 1,000 pages in it that are still classified to this day. But the most popular theory is obviously that the royal family themselves had Diana due to all of the past conflict, her possibly knowing the inner workings and the secrets of the family, and also possibly because of the affairs. And there's some pretty compelling evidence for this theory. Diana described her life living with the royals as a secret hell, that she had to act like she was happy, but said that living in the palace was like being a prisoner. And when their divorce was first settled, she was offered royal security, but she actually turned it down because she was afraid that the royals would continue to spy on her. And after Diana, her butler, Paul Burrell, came forward with this letter. And in this letter, she basically said she was afraid for her life. At one point she wrote, "This particular phase in my life is the most dangerous. My husband is planning an accident in my car, brake failure, and serious head injury in order to make the path clear for Charles to marry." And because of these fears, Diana always wore her seatbelt. And Paul claims this is like a known thing, that she was always afraid one of her cars would malfunction. But what's so weird is she wasn't wearing a seatbelt on the night of the crash, and no one knows why. Experts have even said that if she was wearing one, she possibly could have survived. But after her death, the world was mourning. I mean, people were really, really sad about Diana. She was such a loved person, and the British people were just traumatized by this. And normally when important people, like a royal, the flags are lowered to half staff. It took them a week to raise the flag for Diana, and a statement wasn't released until the day before the funeral. And a few weeks before Diana was, she had been talking about some big surprise. The paparazzi were sure that the couple was about to announce a pregnancy or an engagement. Something big was coming. But since they rushed her embalming, they were never able to do a test on her body, so we don't know to this day if she was possibly pregnant. In February of 1998, Dodi's father announced that he believed that the crash was purposely planned by the Queen's husband, Prince Philip, with help from MI6 because she was pregnant with Dodi's child. And he actually claims that Diana told him that she was pregnant. This was big, and the royal family was stressed out. And many people have pointed at the Queen as the one who called the shot, that she was probably the one heavily involved, but this has been really debated. I think what a lot of people don't understand about the royal family is they do have this separate entity that kind of controls them. There's a lot of powerful people that call the shots in the royal family, in the crown. It's possible that her was planned and carried out by high-level officials and that the Queen didn't even know about it. And then in May 2020, some new information came out from Anonymous, the hacking group, so take this for what you will. The group claimed that Diana had proof that the royals were involved with human trafficking. They claim that she was about to release taped interviews with victims. Both her butler, Paul Burrell, and her sister, Sarah, both listened to 30 minutes of tape interviews after Diana, including the interview that she did with a royal servant who claimed that he was by someone that was close to Prince Charles. But apparently before this tape was ever given to the police, it disappeared. So a lot of people have speculated that if the royal family did find out about these tapes, that they could have had Diana just taken out. So there's clearly a lot here. There's a lot of theories. There's a lot of speculation of what truly happened that night. I don't think we will ever know unless some shocking evidence comes out or some information is declassified in the future. As of now, this is closed, and the royals don't like talking about this at all. Personally, I do believe this was some type of inside job, but that's just me. But that's it for me today, guys. I hope you're having a great day. Stay safe, and I will see you in my next video.